Michael Carrick is now unbeaten in 6 after a difficult evening against Everton, with Senne Lammens stamping his authority before Benjamin Sesko once more proved the difference. We are discussing every inch of a strange evening in Merseyside, your questions and whatever else rears its head. It's your latest episode of The Theatre of Red. Manchester United extended their unbeaten league run to 10 after a hard-fought 1-0 victory at Hill Dickinson Stadium, with Benjamin Sesko once more coming off the bench to deliver the telling blow for Michael Carrick's side. Now, there is so much to unpack from that fixture. Everything from the nature of another worrying display to the grit shown in earning 3 points alongside the calamity of officiating we again witnessed. The ramifications altogether are the weekend's results in the Premier League. As you're all too aware, I am fortunate enough to spend my weeks chatting with individuals whom I consider both friends and colleagues in the industry, getting to share time to hear their views and deliberate on the ongoing soap opera in Manchester. However, I do also enjoy speaking with you all and addressing the many questions that you take the time to send to us here at the Theatre of Red. So, given your continuous ask to dedicate a further episode to time spent with just you and me, let us unwrap a first trip to Everton's wonderful new ground together, shall we? And the brand of rugby that David Moyes opted to utilise under those floodlights. Firstly, outside of the relief of gaining 3 points and building a little bit of breathing space on those below us, while also closing the gap on Aston Villa in third now, it must be said, I think the fact that the game is over is one of the most satisfying things to embrace here, people. I'm all for applauding those challenging evenings where the performance doesn't matter, you know, where it's all about the result and nothing more than moving on to the next fixture. And in all honesty, when you consider so many of our title-winning sides throughout the years, 3 points from poor displays are the hallmarks of truly great teams. That still exists today. And you know as well as I do that it is near impossible to play champagne football every week. But what we witnessed last night, it was borderline painful. I'll put my hands up right now, and I'll acknowledge that no side is obligated to play any set way against Manchester United. And Moyes is entitled to set up however he chooses if he thinks he's going to be able to nick a point or 3. I mean, it's his prerogative to make it difficult for the opposition manager. That's fine. But my God, when you take the decision as a football club to develop a brand new 52,000-seater stadium, and you're managing a team who could have finished the evening in 7th. So many people forget that. They're not looking at relegation places. They were looking at finishing in 7th above Brentford. How that club can endorse the brand of football that we witnessed is beyond me. We knew that United would enjoy most of the possession early on, and that was the case. Everton held about 25% of possession after as many minutes played. Now, as per I covered the game yesterday evening, the home side had a shot on target from a 30-yard Jimmy Garner free kick in the opening half. That was it. And they played with little to no intent outside of their half. Now, that's not to say that they were entirely responsible for what we witnessed, because, I mean, United were complacent and the side lacked that real killer touch in the final third. We've seen numerous times where that hasn't been the case, but they lacked it last night for the second consecutive time during Carrick's short spell. However, what we saw in the second half, it was more of a forward-thinking approach from Everton. They outpassed and outworked United for large parts. They ultimately fashioned 10 efforts on goal and managed to create a sense of anarchy from their Six Nations-style corner routines. Now, it goes without saying, Sesko takes the majority of the headlines for his 5th goal in 6 outings, again acting as that super sub that he's been touted as and enhancing his claims for a starting berth. But you know as well as I do, without Senne Lammens in goals, I mean, I cannot envisage a world where Manchester United leave Merseyside with a point, let alone any points yesterday evening. And it's not that he was forced into a dozen saves, although I believe he made 3 in the second period and showed his composure in not only saving the ball, but holding it and then alleviating potential pressure on his backline. But it was his presence, his presence and his command of the most congested 6-yard box during each of the 10 corner routines that Everton fashioned. And then it was his ability to swat aside each of those deliveries with just consummate ease. Now, I don't like downing any players at the club, past or present. There's very few. But it's hard to imagine a similar outcome if Andre Onana or Altay Bayindir were standing in his boots last night. I know the game is done and dusted now, and a win is a win ahead of Sunday's arrival at Crystal Palace. But it would be foolish to completely disregard a poor showing after what we witnessed against West Ham previously. This is the same old issue of struggling to break down a low block and eventually looking vulnerable when that side opts to start moving forward and putting a little bit of pressure on. And it's exactly what we saw last night. Now, if you follow the work that we put out on the website, you know that I'm a huge fan of Carrick. And I think it would take a very brave decision to move for an alternative manager should we end up in third or fourth after what has been and gone in the previous seasons. Call a spade a spade. 16 points from a possible 18. That's an absolutely ridiculous return. And I don't think that any Red could have imagined that in their wildest dreams. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't discuss these things, people, and the inevitable issues that they will raise if a solution cannot be found. This is not an issue of Carrick and Steve Holland's making, by the way. This is obviously a legacy situation that we have endured for years now. You play attractive, transitional football against the top sides, while then struggling with ample possession against the lower sides. It's a conundrum. And that's what it is. It's a conundrum. It's something I discuss regularly. And it's one that needs to be sorted sooner rather than later. Because as good as Sesko has been, you can't continuously expect a 22-year-old to save the day. Now, at this point, you're probably listening, what's he on about? Don't think I'm going down a negative channel here. I assure you, I'm not. We're sitting fourth. 3 points ahead of Liverpool and Chelsea, 3 points behind Villa in third, 8 behind City and 11 behind Arsenal, who have played a game more. And when you consider that the majority of this squad ended last season in 15th place with 42 points and only 11 wins, we've passed both totals with 11 games remaining and sit top of the form charts over the last 10 fixtures. It goes without saying, things are extremely good in terms of an upturn in results, and many performances have been encouraging, particularly individual showings. And this is all the byproduct of momentum and confidence. Sesko, you have to start with him. He has disregarded the elite punditry of the likes of Tim Sherwood, who claimed that he wasn't good enough to wear the shirt after hitting a brace against Burnley at the beginning of January, if you can't remember that. Now, I'm sure Benjamin cried himself to sleep that night. And even though Gary Neville continues to do his best to belittle everything he can, this is a striker who is growing from strength to strength. Now, in what I just said, in case you missed that, our Gary, Manchester United supporting Gary, decided to state that he doesn't think Sesko is ever going to be the perfect striker for Manchester United after last night's game. And bear in mind, this is a young forward who is still acclimatising to English football. And he hit his 5th goal in 6 league appearances last night, which equates to 1 every 37 minutes that he has played in that time period. Look, I know that there is a necessity for sensationalism in football journalism and commentary. And for those of you who know me, you'll be aware that this is why I have turned down several postings with publications and stations, because quite simply, I refuse to churn out clickbait or say or write rubbish just for the sake of saying it. It's just not my makeup. You can call me stupid for refusing to comply with that and get onto a grander stage across the water, but I just won't do it. But Sesko was always going to require time to bed into the Premier League. And even though he is now firmly in place for a start against Palace, you have to be realistic in understanding it may not all go to plan when he is given additional minutes, because the Bundesliga is an entirely different dynamic. So as you're listening now, I ask you to do this. Keep all of that in mind if and when he misplaces a pass or does something underwhelming, because it doesn't mean that he isn't good enough or capable of progressing further. This is all part of the process. And that was a message that Carrick conveyed to us all in the media in his post-match comments yesterday evening.
Sometimes I get why everyone's talking about it and making a bigger deal of it, but I've got a really good relationship with Ben. We had some really good conversations, and he's in a really good place, and part of us is helping him take his steps in development, and growing him as a player, and sometimes that's little steps, sometimes that's bigger steps. He's taken some huge steps recently in terms of the goals he scored and the impact and that confidence and that belief that he's playing with now is great to see, and we obviously got to manage that as well, and we got some good forwards, so it's one of those decisions that we got to try and get right, but I've got no problem with Ben, and he hasn't got an issue. He obviously wants to play, but I can't speak highly enough of how he's been and the work he's putting in and his attitude to come on and do what he's done again. I thought he's finished just with so much confidence and belief and ruthless finish, which kind of sums up where he's at the minute, which is great to see.
I can't help but feel that it's just nice to hear some common sense. And to his credit, that has been a hallmark of Carrick's approach since he assumed control of this team. It's a pragmatic approach and a public stance that doesn't differ much from his personal style. And not only are supporters enjoying the results, but many people get in touch and share their love for the quiet calm that he brings to the position. His ability and unassuming ability to not involve himself with the everyday nonsense that people attempt to generate around the football club. As is usually the case in the aftermath of any win, we get inundated with emails of positivity and hope, alongside numerous questions and requests for discussions on this very podcast. Now, it's been difficult to include these since the turn of the year because the conversations with my guests have just consumed all of the airtime. But I am going to involve some of the topics today. And as I said at the beginning, I will do my best to apply some justice for the time that you've all spent sending these through to me recently. A man called Peter Bradbury emailed us late last night at editor@theatre-of-red.com. And he was touching on the worry that he had before kickoff, having heard the news, obviously, about Lisandro Martinez's absence and how Lenny Yoro would fare in his place. Now, thankfully, he was pleased with the outcome, but he feels that Leach's importance to this side was again evident without the Argentine being at the heart of defence, and he would love me to elaborate on this particular topic. Firstly, thank you, obviously, for taking the time, Peter. As you know, I share your admiration for Martinez in this side. I do so because I have long been an advocate for the importance of Licha in the team, not only with his experience in defence, despite what some would have you believe regarding his height and his size, but with the confidence that he inspires through distribution and passing through the channels. I mean, you need only look at those glorious over-the-top passes that we see to Brian Mbeumo that we've just all become so accustomed to, and how invaluable that they would have proved last night during moments where Everton opted to push further up the field. Martinez's ability to gauge the weight of a pass is so sorely underappreciated across the media. And as I've said numerous times, I do genuinely believe that his injury last season was one of the most damaging factors during Ruben Amorim's tenure. He's already proven the likes of Scholes and Butts so wrong. I mean, that doesn't even merit further conversation. But his lack of control in the build-up stages, as a quarterback, if you will, his cunning when instigating transitions were a huge factor last night. And I hope we are only looking at a minor calf issue because his word to the team is up there with anybody, in my view. Now, you can disagree with that. That's just my personal opinion. But that said, Yoro came in for only his fourth start since November. And I think it's fair to say he was assured in his distribution as well. I wrote yesterday evening after the game about his impact. And even though he didn't take risks with his passes per se, he did complete in the high 80%, albeit most of those were inside his own half. But then defensively, he was very assured, winning 100% of his ground duels. I can't remember the exact figure, but he won 100% of them. And he completed 8 or 9 defensive contributions alongside 5 ball recoveries and 4 clearances. Now, this was an extremely good showing from another hugely talented youngster who again highlighted his current ability and also the potential scope for growth, just like Sesko. And it's having the ability to grow into a leading figure for this football team. Like, people forget he is only 20 years of age. We haven't begun to see the true powers of his defensive prowess. And already we are speaking about assured displays against the definition of a physical opposition in their own backyard in the Premier League. I will say, he looks a little more comfortable playing in a back four with the added assurance of a pacey option alongside him on the wing. And I think that we will see further growth and advancement playing alongside the likes of Maguire, Martinez, and De Ligt. And long may it continue, Peter, because it can only benefit the football club. But as we know and have already touched upon, an assured defence requires a competent body between the posts. And that is where our next question falls into. Sarah Clark got in touch on Twitter, paid her admiration to Senne Lammens and his growing influence on the site. She said, on a night when Edwin van der Sar returned to our tellies, have we got the makings of another legendary goalkeeper at Old Trafford today? Like Yarrow and Sesko, Lammens is still taking baby steps in his career as far as I'm concerned. As we know, goalkeepers generally play at a higher level for longer, given the differences in physical requirements. And he is only 23, remember. So that said, what he has added in a short period is stability and an undeniable sense of quality when it is required. He's had, a handful of games over 20 for the club, and he's collected 5 clean sheets. But importantly, 3 of those have come under Carrick in only 6 games. And that's no mean feat, all things considered, especially the opposition that we've been playing against. But what he offers in terms of control of his area and a willingness to get involved with the likes of James Tarkowski, that shows belief in his ability and a confidence in the outcome of his actions. We rarely saw that with Onana or Bayindir. And that speaks volumes about this footballer. Now, I alluded to this already, but how he managed to maintain a clean sheet last night with that rubbish that we saw in front of him, that's absolutely beyond me. But furthermore, like every youngster, there will be moments that leave you scratching your head. And that's all part and process. And we see less and less with every passing week. That comes with confidence and it comes with momentum. I think it's evident that he has won his teammates over already. All of his backline appear to be more than happy to designate control behind them. And that is a monumental step for any goalkeeper, especially to earn respect from the likes of veterans like Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw, because that tells you everything that you need to know today. I won't go as far as making comparisons to the great Van der Sar just yet, Sarah, but his arrival speaks volumes about the future planning that we're witnessing, alongside those already mentioned. And that's not forgetting the likes of Aidan Heaven and Patrick Dorgu, because these are all very talented young players who are already showing what they have, but they have massive ceilings for growth and leadership for a decade or more. I know that some questioned Lammens' purchase instead of the tried and tested like Emi Martinez, but I'd love to hear from those individuals today, because we have a very good one in our young Belgian. And I think that is an absolute certainty. But we've landed on the rugby that we saw last night a couple of times. There were obviously numerous emails and messages about this. A man called Thomas Gabriel Smith got in touch during the game. And that's just how irate that he was, because it was actually in the middle of the game and had more than a couple of unsavoury words to aim at the Everton structure and the role that Arsenal have to play in all of this new look setup. Now, I won't repeat exactly what he said, but I'm sure you can fill in the gaps just on that alone, okay? He did finish by asking my take on this type of behaviour, alongside the refereeing decisions that are becoming a weekly talking point in England. Now, truthfully, I was watching through gritted teeth at times myself. I found the antics embarrassing, if I'm being honest. That, to me, what we saw last night and what we've seen from Arsenal in recent weeks and months, that's not football. And whether or not it's above or below the rules, there should be no place for that brand of play in the modern game, especially in England, because we speak so much about the quality of the Premier League and how this division is the elite in Europe. And then you see the likes of Anthony Gordon with Newcastle welcoming a shot at European football because it's a break from the endless aggression and the almost unsanctioned nonsense that we're witnessing every week domestically. And before you even try to comprehend this allowance of that structure in front of a goalkeeper for a set piece, answer me this. How did Darren England allow Jared Brandwaite to escape without a yellow card after half an hour when he almost took the shirt clean off Ahmad's back? I think it was Ahmed, off the top of my head anyways, but it made no sense. It was the most obvious booking that you're ever going to see, and he just waved it aside. And that adds to the back and forth of bizarre decisions that we see weekly. It's almost taken the love out of the game in certain aspects. Let's go one further and look at the London Derby at the weekend. Spurs are losing, and they have a goal notched off for the slightest touch on Gabriel's back. Arsenal are up 2-1 at the time. Yet, if the roles were reversed, that would never have been given as a penalty. So how in the name of God is Peter Banks giving that decision and effectively having his say in the title race? It all boils down to the standard of officiating in England is genuinely going to the dogs. And that's with everything from these on-field decisions to the nonsense that we regularly see with VAR and the inconsistencies there. And then you see Sky profiting from this with their ref watch section, allowing Dermot Gallagher to do everything in his power to say the opposite of what is going through the heads of 99.9% of the people watching, because there's no such thing as bad publicity, and obviously sensationalism and notoriety sells. I'm sure listening you can gather that I don't like any of this, and I find the instability and the uncertainty, it's just beyond acceptable at this stage of the game. That's before you even try to make a logical debate to allow what we say Everton deploy in front of Lammens last night, because that's not football. I just don't care what anybody says. For me, David Moyes has been watching Andy Farrell in the last couple of weeks and decided to utilise some of his tactical assets. But how any referee can look at the setup and think it is acceptable, it is absolutely beyond me. Frustration aside, I know that we're not going to solve this issue here today, nor is my opinion going to affect any of the decision makers. And I'm also aware that many of these would reference the swings and the roundabouts in the game and how Spurs will likely benefit from a decision in the coming weeks. But that shouldn't be the case, people. You know, as it stands, we got away with it last night, and Arsenal benefited at the weekend, extending their lead at the top of the table to 5, albeit they have played a game more than those below. Stephen Bush got in contact and has asked about the race for the Champions League and the title, given Jamie Carragher's comments about United being what he says are a certainty to finish in the Champions League places. And Stephen asks whether the club could go one further and claw back on the difference to the top, similar to what we saw 30 years ago against Newcastle. Firstly, you must have read the article that I published in the last couple of days, because I took a deep dive into that situation with Keegan and Fergie 30 years ago. But how great is it to even be able to jokingly have a chat about this, Stephen, given how far the team has fallen in recent seasons? In terms of the title race, I certainly don't think it's as done and dusted as some believe it is, especially when you have the literal scenario at play that City will win the title if they were to win the remainder of their fixtures. And as much as I hate to say it, recent history would stand beside that before backing what is a perennial bottle job like Arsenal, regardless of how many results they've claimed this season. Regarding the possibility of United getting amongst that, I think it's probably hard to imagine any world where we see that, Stephen, as much as I would like it, especially when we don't play either of them again. Maybe if we got a chance at both of them again, who knows? But there is every chance of catching Villa in third and ending the season in the top 3. When you realistically sit down and peel it all back, to earn that after a 15th place finish on our third manager of the season would be nothing short of a superb return. Now, thankfully, there is also credible breathing space on Brentford in 7th, because we have an 8-point advantage on them now. But you have to look directly below us, and Liverpool and Chelsea are only a stone's throw away. There is a lot of football to be played this season, and anything can happen in 11 fixtures, especially when referees are making such bizarre decisions on a weekly basis, and we have to play both of them in the space of 2 weeks. Let me ask you a question. Would you have taken this situation when we lost 3-1 at Brentford in September? I mean, 100% you would. Every day of the week and twice on Sunday. It's not a bad place to be, really and truly, at the end of February. We got one final question today. Given the date it's in it, it comes from Mark Rain. And he simply asks, am I now convinced that Carrick should be given the role permanently? If I was told that I had to choose today between installing Michael Carrick for the foreseeable future or appointing an unknown continental variable, I would have to side with what we know, because it is currently working. I think that's fair to say. Now, I know many people can look at European names who have collected silverware and think that they could just come in and apply the same in Manchester. That is not always the case. This football club requires stability and the long-term trust and backing of one coaching team. I think only then we can see actual growth and aim for something real, such as this super ambitious Project 150. But that said, Carrick has had 6 games. He has nearly double that remaining. Right now, there's evidence that he may continue in this fashion, but nothing is a guarantee. And while I think it would be wise to cast a wider net of consideration, Carrick has at least earned to be a significant part of that in recent weeks. If I stretch it further, should he maintain this form, unlock a way of playing a little bit more attractive football against a low block, and then achieve Champions League football, as I said previously, I think it would be the definition of self-destruction and a very, very brave decision from a suit in a boardroom not to appoint him. And that is about the best I can do with that one, Mark. And I'd like to think it's as logical as you'd expect at this stage, but by all means, feel free to let me know otherwise. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sum of all parts this afternoon ahead of a Sunday setting at Old Trafford and an opportunity to claim another 3 points against what has become a Jekyll and Hyde Crystal Palace. I hope you have enjoyed this little chat today and diving into all of your questions. By all means, continue to get in touch and submit your feedback. I'm always happy to address every single bit of it as I will. And if you want to hear more episodes like this, please let me know, because I'm only operating on a whim otherwise. I'd ask you to keep up to date with everything that we produce at the Theatre of Red website and to like and subscribe wherever you're listening today, including YouTube, and to leave a review if you'd be as kind, because we will get back to each and every one of them, that I promise. So until we speak again, stay safe, enjoy the feel-good factor of 3 points, and further growth in Michael Carrick's journey in Manchester. Up the Reds.